Today, we're finally going to be diving into the 2024 Player's Handbook, and I'm going to be giving you my first impressions on it. This video is sponsored by Cheipaku Maps, more on them later. Greetings gamers, my name is Anto and I've been playing tabletop games now for more than 20 years, and my goal on this channel is to help you have more fun at the table. And today we're finally cracking open the revised 5th edition Player's Handbook and taking a look through it. Now I want to say right up the top that I paid for this book with my own money. Wizards didn't send this to me, they aren't paying me. Hell, they've never even responded to any of the emails trying to get on the list to get one of these things early. Now this video isn't going to be a deep dive into every change in the book. Frankly, those videos have already been made in abundance in the last 6 weeks, to the point where scrolling through the feed on my YouTube page on launch day, it didn't really feel like it was any different to a regular Tuesday because everyone had already made their videos. Instead, I want to talk about some of the things about this book that jumped out to me, some of the things that I love about the revised 5th edition rules, some of the things that I think Wizards really dropped the ball on, and kind of discuss the book as a whole. As always, we're going to start with the negatives because I never want to be accused of being a shill. So let's dive straight in to the bad. Now, right off the bat, the absence of a photocopyable player character sheet in this book really sucks. I know they want to drive people to D&D Beyond, and you can download the character sheet there if you can find it, but it means that the book isn't actually usable as it is. I've got a second-hand copy of the 4th edition PHB, and one of my favorite things about it is flipping to the back of the book and seeing the still filled in sheet for Atomus Akitis, the level 3 paladin. I love seeing the ghosts of characters past erased on the page, feeling the texture of who knows how many adventurers that came before Atomus who were rubbed out to make way for this new character. There's a real tangible connection to what's come before from this that we'll just never get again, and I kind of hate that. Also, accessing the PDF of the new character sheet is not intuitive for brand new players who aren't familiar with D&D Beyond. The book directs you to D&D Beyond, but when you get to the homepage, there's nothing to let you know that the sheet is bound inside the source for the basic rules or the PHB. Instead, as a new player, you're likely going to be hunting around the site's navigation, and maybe you end up in the Learn to Play page, which doesn't have a copy. But there is a new player guide button at the bottom of that page, and if you follow that, you'll eventually find a link to the 2014 version of the character sheet. It's like WotC are stuck in this weird space between the old and the new. They want you to use the digital tools, but they won't make PDFs available or design the book in such a way that it's easy for reference. Now, throughout the PHB, the text has a number of references that say things like, see chapter 3 for more details, instead of listing specific page numbers. Now, WotC's weak excuse is that this is because of translation versions and errata updates, making it so pagination might change. But my buddy Taryn over on the Indestructible channel put up a video recently showing how stunningly easy it is to link these page references in modern publishing software so that any of those changes happen automatically. There's really no excuse for why this shouldn't be done. And overall, while the layout of the book has been much improved, there are still some choices that are completely baffling to me, such as the fixed hit points by class table on page 42. I don't understand why that information wasn't given alongside each class like it was in 2014, because it's a much more logical place to find that information. Similarly, I love the rules glossary, and I'm going to talk a lot more about that later, but a lot of the in-text rules inside the book just point you straight to the glossary without explaining the rule within their own section, and this would obviously have increased the word count of the book, but it would have made for a much more natural reading experience where you're reading through the section and that section tells you how the rule works, and you don't have to flip all the way back to the back of the book to understand the rule, to flip all the way back to carry on with the context of the ruling. And then as a bonus gripe that doesn't really have anything to do with anything, I want to mention that meal costs for modest incomes have risen, but for aristocrats have fallen. And that's just a little too real for my taste, and bad WotC. This video is sponsored by Cheipaku Maps. They are a long-time supporter of the channel, and anytime I need a map, the first place I go is to Cheipaku. I head over to the Cheipaku website, look at their map browser, search for the type of map that I'm looking for, be it a forest or a desert, or maybe I'm looking for some kind of wizard's labyrinth and look to see if they've got something that matches the vibe that I'm after, then I head over to their Patreon, download the map that I need, or grab the integration for Foundry VTT, and I am off to the races. Chaipaku have got thousands of maps available that you can pick up over on their Patreon, and at the higher tiers you get access to the integrated VTT versions of the map. So these are the versions that you can load into the likes of Foundry, and they'll already have the walls, the lighting, everything that you need to be able to run them already good to go. And this is what I use. So just this last week, my players were wandering through the jungle and I rolled up a hag encounter on a random table. So I went over to the Chaipaku map browser, searched for hag and witch until I found this set and all of its variations, loaded them into Foundry, had the players be introduced to the hag in a half-elf guise in this kind of glade version of the map, and then when it was time to go and combat started, I switched out for the full hag's lair version of the map. And that's one of the things that I love most about Chaipaku, is just to really easily be able to get great looking maps with everything that I need, with walls and lighting and scenic effects all good to go, and I don't have to do any of that work. I'll leave a link to Chaipaku maps down in the description, and thanks again to them for supporting the channel. So let's talk about the things that I do like about the revised 5th edition PHB. Starting off, it smells incredible. 10 out of 10, one of the best new book smells I've ever experienced. And I want to know whether I'm like in the minority for that being like a really big consideration. Like I wasn't expecting to open it up and be like, wow, this smells amazing. I also love that we get a section that talks about how to play the game at the start of the book before character creation in a reasonable amount of depth. Both 2nd edition and 4th edition had basic how to play sections before character creation. So I do find Jeremy Crawford's comments on this being the first time it's ever happened to be a little disingenuous, but the how to play sections in both those editions were tiny compared to the ones in revised 5e and offered nowhere near as much detail on the mechanics of play, so I get where he's coming from. But that feeling of, oh, they were a little bit disingenuous in the way that they talked about that during the promo is something that kept coming back up. Turns out we're not actually in the good yet, we're still in the bad, because this is actually still something that really pisses me off. In the promo for this book, they talked about how you're going to find guidance for starting at a higher level, and we're going to give you all guidance for how much gold you should get at a higher level.
It goes even further than making a character at first level. It also provides rules for making a character at higher levels. And to support starting at 3rd level, we have now the rules for starting at that level in the player's handbook, as well as at any other level. So if you want to start a character at 18th level, because your DM wants you to dive right into epic play, the rules for that are in the player's handbook too.
Let's open the book and see what that guidance is, shall we? So if you flip to page 43 of your shiny new player's handbook, you're going to find the table that Jeremy Crawford so lavishly talked about in the promo to this book, talking about all of the, oh, here's all the starting gold you're going to get at a higher level. And the table is exactly the same as the table that was presented in the DMG in 2014. Oh wait, except it's got less information. If you go to page 38 of your 2014 DMG, you're going to find a starting equipment table. And that breaks down your character level into bands, level 1 to 4, level 5 to 10, level 11 to 16, and level 17 to 20. Exactly the same as in your PHB for 2024. And then you're going to find equipment and money. And this table is exactly the same as it is in the 2014 DMG. You get the same amount of gold and you get the same starting equipment. Literally, the only difference between these two tables is in the 2024 version of the rules, you get a few more magic items. So a high magic campaign in 2014 would give you 3 uncommon magic items, 2 rare, 1 very rare, and that's it. Whereas the 2014 version will give you 4 uncommon magic items, 3 rare and 1 very rare, and 2 common items. So you get more magic by default in 2024 than you did even in high magic campaigns in 2014. Plus, there is no delineation between low standard and high magic in 2024. It's just one table. So actually get less information in 2024 than you did in 2014. And they had the goal in the pre-promo to be like, oh, you're going to get this shiny new thing. No, f*** you, wizards. That's not okay. Now that might seem like a really minor thing to get so hung up on, but I'm well aware that they have spent a couple of months telling us that we're going to get magic item pricing in the new DMG, and I don't think it's going to happen. I think we're going to get the same table that we had in Xanathar's guide that gives us prices for magic items, and it's not okay, and I am actually much more angry about it than I thought until I sat down to film this video. So we're going to move on to other things that I do like about the book before I riot. Woosa! Woosa! So when we get to the character creation section, guiding a new player through the process with the annotated character sheet is great, but again, frustrating that we don't get a blank one in the book, but I do like that we get the numbered section of the character sheet, and it walks us through that process a little bit nicer than 2014. There is a brief mention of Session 0 at the start of the book, but it's very lacking in terms of the stuff it covers, and it feels more like something that was included so they could have a soundbite of someone on the design team saying it was in the book versus it being in any way useful. But by far, the biggest plus for me in the revised 5th edition PHP is easily the rules glossary. Having all the most commonly referenced rules in one place is amazing from a usability standpoint, and it's going to make looking things up so much easier. Also, in general across the book, things have gotten clarified for the most part. Even though I'm not planning on switching my game to the revised rules until all 3 core books are out, I've found myself looking at this book multiple times to see how something is worded or ruled compared to the 2014 version, because in many cases the language is clearer or the rule is more explicit, which helps me make rulings at the table when I want some backup from the text. A great example of this is on page 20, which now defines exactly what an object is. This is really useful for something like the Find Trap spell, which now also specifies it applies to objects and mechanisms. Overall, the presentation of information in this book is vastly improved compared to 2014. Like I said before, they really could benefit from in-text page number references. And I would like to have seen a color-coded chapter indicator included in the trade dress on the right-hand side of the page, which descends as the chapters go along. This way, as you look at the outer edges of the book, you'd be able to flip to the right chapter by sight. These little things would make the book even more useful as a reference text. And while it's clear WotC put more thought into the presentation this time around, there's still a lot of user experience stuff that they could improve on. In terms of changes to the classes, I'm pretty happy across the board. It seems like all the classes can broadly do their archetypal thing better and more consistently now, and a lot of the classes have received a lot of nice quality of life changes. I do think there'll be a subsection of folks who are building characters using only the blue options on RPGbot will be disappointed, as things like the Great Weapon Master feat and some of the spells have been toned down. But overall, I think most folks making new characters should be pretty happy with most of these changes. One thing that I do like is that for each class's epic boon entry, there's a recommended feat choice, which is going to really help those players who get overwhelmed by decision paralysis. I actually kind of wish that all of the ASI levels for each class had 2 to 4 recommended feats included with them, as that would be a big help for those players who really struggle at looking at a list of 70 plus feats and picking the best ones. Speaking of feats, I think feats have had a really positive overall. I mentioned Great Weapon Master, which is no longer as bonkers in its damage and is gated to level 4 and onwards, and has strength requirements. And while gating feats to certain levels does open the possibility of feat trees to return, I think it's worth the risk for much more interesting design space that it allows for by having feats be able to be vastly different in their power levels. The epic boons, which you get at level 19, are very cool, but they are pretty inconsistent in their power level, and several of them also share the same design space, such as the boon of dimensional travel, which allows you to teleport 30 feet after attacking, but the boon of speed increases your movement speed by 30 and also allows you to disengage as a bonus action, so it feels more versatile overall, while still allowing you the option to reliably get out of combat. That kind of overlapping stuff. A lot of the more broken feats have also been addressed, such as Lucky, which now explicitly grants advantage rather than giving an extra die, so no more super advantage, or the Keen Mind feat, which no longer requires the DM to be a human supercomputer and instead just gives a moderate but measurable mechanical buff and allows the player to take the steady action as a bonus action. Speaking of the steady action, it's one of the stealth most interesting things in the entire revised rules, in my opinion. On the face of it, it's a way to make an intelligent skill check in combat, but with the right DM support, it could become an invaluable pillar of combat gameplay. Depending on the skill you choose, you can recall knowledge about different types of creatures, and it's possible in the future that we'll see rules on using this to determine creatures' abilities or weaknesses. Actually, that future is now. This is something that I've already started implementing for my monsters published in my SIDEQUEST magazine and the Year 3 annual, which is live on Kickstarter right now, linked in the description below. Every new monster that I produce includes a legends table, which gives the DM a table of different information to convey to the players depending on the result of their study action roll. Roll low and you'll get some common folklore about a creature, but roll high enough and you'll remember a snippet of esoteric lore you once read that mentions a creature being vulnerable to cold damage, for example. How useful the study action ends up being is really going to depend on how much WotC support it. Now, we've seen with Pathfinder 2nd Edition and the Recall Knowledge skill that without robust GM support for this type of thing, players just won't use it. So it's something I know I want to focus on in my design as a third-party creator to really empower GMs and players. There's a lot of small quality of life changes to the action economy throughout the revised rules that I also really like. Things like grenade-style items such as Alchemist Fire or Holy Water or even breath weapons. Being able to replace one of your attacks when you have multiple attacks is a really nice change, and it'll see these things being used a lot more. Similarly, grapple and shove becoming part of an unarmed attack is great, and again, it just improves the action economy. But with all these changes to core player action economy and the way so many classes get more access to bonus actions now, I do worry what the monster manual will look like in the future. Without a healthy buff to monsters, making challenging encounters for the average DM is going to get a lot more difficult under the revised rules, especially as so many folks don't follow the proper rules for building encounters to begin with. See my video up here. Now, overall, I think the revised Player's Handbook is a broad improvement on the 2014 book, both in layout and in physical design, as well as the mechanical design for the most part. But I do think the argument for superhero D&D is maybe stronger than ever before, certainly within 5e's lifespan. The rules have also filed off a lot of the edges of classic D&D in a way that I think is a shame, and it's something I'll probably talk about in a future video. But I think if you're looking for that classic low fantasy D&D experience, this is no longer the system for you, and you'd be better served with systems like Shadowdark, Knave, Castles and Crusades, or Dungeon Crawl Classics. If you're looking for a system with larger than life characters who act like big goddamn heroes, but that you don't need a VTT or an accountant's degree to run because of the complexity, revised 5th edition is probably the best option for heroic fantasy out there. It's firmly middle of the road in terms of its complexity, and actually pretty middle of the road in a lot of other aspects as well. But it is the most supported system on the market. You can walk into any game store in the world and you'll probably find folks actively looking for a game of D&D who are familiar with the rules and ready to play, and that kind of availability is really hard to beat. I'd love to know what you think of the revised Player's Handbook, and if you've had the chance to take a look at it down below, and let me know what kind of videos you'd like to see me make about it while you're down there. But until next time, happy gaming. That hurt like a motherfucker.